Pisces, welcome back. I hope everyone's doing well. As always, this is a general reading, so take what resonates and simply leave the rest behind. And before we dive in, thank you for being here. I truly appreciate your support, your energy, and your beautiful presence. Okay, Pisces, I have to be honest, the moment I started pulling cards for you, something felt different. There's a strong sense that someone is creating distance right now, but at the same time, they can't stop thinking about you. And honestly, the deeper I look into this energy, the more complicated their feelings seem to become. Because this doesn't feel like someone who's walking away because they don't care. It feels more like someone who's struggling with feelings they never expected to become this deep. So, let's take a look at the cards and see what's really going on here. Pisces, this energy feels heavy. Not heavy because there is no love here. Heavy because there may be too much of it. What's interesting is that I keep seeing the King of Cups showing up here, and every time I look at this person, I get the feeling that they're trying very hard to keep themselves together. From the outside, they may appear calm, they may appear distant, they may even appear unaffected. But underneath all of that, there's so much happening. It's almost like they're carrying an entire ocean inside their chest, whilst trying to convince everyone around them that everything is perfectly fine. And honestly, I don't think everything is fine. I think this person has been trying to push these feelings down for a very long time. I think they've been telling themselves that they can move on, that they can focus on other things, that eventually these emotions will fade away. But the more they try to bury them, the stronger they seem to become. Because every time they create distance, they end up thinking about you even more. Every time they try to distract themselves, something reminds them of you. A song, a place, a conversation, a random moment during the day. And suddenly you're right there in their mind again. I can't ignore the Five of Cups energy sitting here. There is so much regret attached to this situation, not just sadness. Not just longing, regret. The kind of regret that follows someone when they're alone with their thoughts. The kind that shows up when the noise finally fades away and there's nothing left to distract them. I keep feeling this person replaying certain moments, certain conversations, certain decisions, and asking themselves questions they don't really have answers for. Why did I react that way? Why did I push Pisces away? Why didn't I say what I was actually feeling? Why did I act like I didn't care? It's almost like they're revisiting old memories from a completely different perspective now. Things that once felt justified don't seem to make as much sense anymore, and that's creating a lot of emotional discomfort. Okay, the moon keeps appearing around this situation, and wow, this card feels loud, because I don't think this person fully understands their own emotions. Not yet. I feel confusion. I feel uncertainty. I feel somebody standing in the middle of a dark road trying to figure out which direction they're supposed to go. Part of them wants to move closer. Part of them wants to protect themselves. Part of them wants to say something. Part of them wants to stay hidden. And that's where the struggle is. Because what they're feeling isn't simple. This isn't a small crush. This isn't a passing attraction. This feels like somebody realizing that another person has become much more important than they intended. And that realization is making them uncomfortable. You know, some people are perfectly fine when feelings stay light, when everything feels casual, when nothing is at stake. But once emotions become real, once vulnerability enters the picture, that's when fear starts showing up. And that's exactly what this feels like. I keep hearing this person say, I wasn't supposed to feel this much. Almost like they thought they could control the situation, control their emotions, control the connection. And now they're realizing that feelings don't always work that way. Honestly, Pisces, I don't even think they're running from you. I think they're running from what they feel when they think about you. Because every time they allow themselves to be honest, they end up facing emotions they've spent a long time trying to avoid. There's sadness here, there's longing here, there's guilt here. And underneath all of that, there's love. A love that feels bigger than what they're comfortable handling right now. And the strange thing is, the distance isn't helping. If anything, the distance seems to be making everything louder. The silence isn't creating clarity. It's creating more reflection, more memories, more questions, more emotional weight. Because when somebody truly leaves emotionally, the energy feels disconnected. This doesn't feel disconnected at all. If anything, it feels like they're carrying this connection everywhere they go, trying not to look at it, trying not to think about it, trying not to acknowledge it, and somehow finding themselves right back in the same place, thinking about Pisces, missing Pisces, wondering about Pisces, and questioning whether walking away actually made anything easier. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like the feelings they were trying to escape have only grown stronger in the silence. Okay, I keep picking up on this strange push and pull energy around them. It's almost like every time they start getting closer emotionally, something inside them immediately tells them to pull back. And honestly, I don't think they're doing it because they want to. I think they're doing it because it feels safer. What's interesting is that the Two of Pentacles keeps showing up here. And when I look at this person, I don't see somebody confidently moving in one direction. I see somebody constantly going back and forth. One day, they're convinced they need to reach out. The next day, they're telling themselves they should leave everything alone. One moment, they're imagining what it would be like to have you in their life. The next moment, they're convincing themselves it's too risky. And wow, that internal battle feels exhausting. Because they're not just juggling circumstances, they're juggling emotions, they're juggling fear. They're juggling old wounds that haven't completely healed. I keep getting the feeling that this person learned a long time ago that depending on other people can lead to disappointment, not because they're cold, not because they don't care, but because somewhere in their story, trust became complicated. Maybe promises weren't kept. Maybe someone they loved walked away. Maybe they opened their heart once and regretted it. Whatever happened, it left a mark, and that mark still exists. You know, sometimes people become so used to protecting themselves that they don't even realize they're doing it anymore. It becomes automatic, a survival instinct, a reflex. The moment something feels important, they create distance. The moment they feel vulnerable, they shut down. The moment they care too much, they start looking for reasons to escape. And that's exactly what this feels like. I keep seeing the Nine of Wands sitting around this person. They're tired, emotionally tired, not because of you, because they've spent so much energy trying to keep their walls standing. What's fascinating is that the walls aren't protecting them anymore. The walls are exhausting them. And I think they're starting to realize that. Because every time they try to convince themselves that distance is the answer, something inside them disagrees. Every time they try to move on mentally, they end up right back in the same emotional space. Thinking, remembering, wondering, questioning. It's like they're standing guard over a heart that's already given itself away. And honestly, I don't think they know what to do with that realization. I have to be honest. This person does not come across as somebody who likes feeling out of control. They like certainty. They like knowing where they stand. They like understanding what the outcome might be before they take a risk. But this connection doesn't seem to offer that kind of certainty. It asks them to trust. And trust is exactly where they struggle. Because trust requires vulnerability. Trust requires opening a door without knowing what's waiting on the other side. And for somebody carrying old wounds, that's terrifying. There's something about the death card here that I can't ignore. Not because I feel an ending. Honestly, I feel resistance. I feel somebody standing at the edge of change and realizing they can't keep being the same version of themselves forever. And that's scary. Because change sounds beautiful until you're the one going through it. Change sounds exciting until you're the one being asked to let go of old habits, old defenses, old coping mechanisms. I keep hearing this person say, but what if I get hurt again? And that's the real issue. Not whether they care. Not whether they think about you. Not whether they feel something. The issue is what happens if they allow themselves to fully experience those feelings. Because once they do that, they can't pretend anymore. They can't hide behind distance anymore. They can't tell themselves this connection doesn't matter. And deep down, I think they know that. You know what's interesting? The more I sit with this energy, the less this feels like somebody running away from love. It feels like somebody running away from the possibility of loss. Those are two completely different things. Because when you've experienced enough disappointment, your mind starts preparing for worst-case scenarios before anything even happens. You start expecting things to fall apart. You start expecting people to leave. You start expecting pain. And when someone comes along who genuinely reaches your heart, instead of feeling relieved, you feel exposed. That's exactly what keeps coming through. Exposed. This connection makes them feel seen in a way they're not used to. You notice things. You understand things. You pick up on emotions they don't always say out loud. And honestly, that's both comforting and frightening for them. Because if you can see them that clearly, you can also hurt them deeply. At least that's how their fear interprets it. I keep picking up on moments where this person sits alone and argues with themselves. One side is saying, just tell Pisces how you feel. The other side immediately responds, and then what? One side wants closeness. The other wants protection. One side wants connection. The other wants control. And those two sides have been fighting for a while. The strange thing is that the more they try to stay emotionally detached, the more emotional they seem to become. The distance isn't solving the problem. It's forcing them to sit with feelings they can no longer ignore. And I don't think they're comfortable there yet. But I do think they're starting to understand something important, because the version of themselves that survived the past may not be the version of themselves that can carry this connection forward. And that realization feels much bigger than they're willing to admit right now. Okay, something feels different here. Not because they've suddenly figured everything out. Honestly, I think they're realizing how much of their own story they've been avoiding. I keep seeing judgment around this person. And every time it shows up, I get this image of somebody sitting alone with their thoughts and being unable to run from them anymore. You know those moments in life when everything gets quiet? No distractions, no noise, no excuses. Just you and the truth. That's what this energy feels like. Because for a long time, I think this person was able to convince themselves that certain choices made sense. Certain decisions felt necessary. Certain people deserved their attention. Certain paths seemed easier. But something has shifted. And what's interesting is that the explanations they once gave themselves aren't working anymore. It's almost like they're looking back over the last few years of their life and asking, what was I actually chasing? Because whatever they thought was important doesn't seem nearly as important now. And wow, that's a difficult realization, especially when it forces you to acknowledge things you wish you had done differently. I keep picking up on memories resurfacing, old conversations, missed opportunities, moments where they knew exactly what their heart wanted, but chose something else instead. Not because they didn't care, not because they didn't feel, but because fear was louder than truth. And honestly, fear can be very convincing. Fear has a way of making temporary comfort look like the right choice. Fear has a way of making people walk away from things that matter. And I think they're starting to see that. The world keeps showing up here. And there's something about this energy that feels incredibly reflective, almost like they're standing at the edge of one chapter and realizing they can't keep carrying the same habits into the next one. I don't know why, but I keep seeing someone looking at their own life from above. Like they're finally seeing the bigger picture, not just individual moments, not just isolated decisions, the whole picture. And when they do that, they begin noticing patterns. Patterns they ignored before, patterns that kept repeating, patterns that always seemed to lead them back to the same kind of disappointment, the same emotional emptiness, the same feeling of something missing. And that's where things get uncomfortable, because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Once the truth becomes visible, pretending becomes much harder. There's something about the Seven of Swords here that I can't ignore. And honestly, I don't feel like this person is angry at anybody else right now. I feel like they're frustrated with themselves because they're starting to recognize all the ways they avoided honesty. Not necessarily dishonesty toward other people, dishonesty toward themselves. The stories they told themselves, the feelings they tried to explain away, the emotions they minimized, the connections they acted indifferent toward when deep down they cared much more than they admitted. And that's a difficult thing to face, because nobody likes realizing they were standing in their own way. Nobody enjoys looking back and seeing the moments where they betrayed their own heart. I keep hearing this person think, I knew better, not in a cruel way, not in a self-hating way. More like somebody waking up from a very long sleep, seeing things clearly for the first time, and feeling both relief and regret at the same time. Because clarity can be beautiful, but clarity can also hurt, especially when it arrives late. Okay, the Five of Wands feels very active around them. And honestly, I don't think all of this conflict is happening outside of them. Most of it feels internal. It's like multiple versions of themselves are arguing. The version that wants peace, the version that wants control, the version that wants love, the version that wants safety. And they're all competing for attention. One voice says, follow your heart. Another voice immediately says, what if it goes wrong? One voice says, you already know what matters. Another voice says, don't risk everything. And this battle has been exhausting them. Because no matter which direction they look, the truth keeps following them. The feelings keep following them. The realization keeps following them. I have to be honest. I don't think they're seeing certain people the same way anymore either. There are individuals around them whose influence once felt important. People whose opinions carried weight. People they listened to. People they trusted. And lately, something feels off. It's almost like they're starting to question advice they once accepted without hesitation. Question motives, question intentions, question whether some of the voices around them were actually helping, or simply keeping them stuck. Because sometimes growth creates distance, not just from situations, from people. And I keep picking up on this awareness beginning to emerge. This understanding that not everyone deserves access to their energy. Not everyone deserves influence over their decisions. Not everyone deserves a seat at the table when it comes to matters of the heart. What's fascinating is that the more clarity arrives, the less interested they seem in repeating old cycles. The things that once distracted them don't hold the same appeal. The habits that once felt comfortable feel empty. The masks they used to wear feel heavier. And I think that's surprising even them. Because this isn't happening through force. It's happening through awareness. It's happening because they're finally seeing what certain choices cost them. They're finally understanding what was lost along the way. And somewhere in the middle of all that realization, they keep finding themselves thinking about someone who never completely left their heart. Okay. There's something about the Page of Swords here that I can't ignore, because this energy doesn't feel disconnected at all. In fact, it feels surprisingly aware. It's almost like no matter how much distance exists between the two of you, this person somehow still knows what's happening in your world. And honestly, I don't think that's accidental. I keep getting the feeling that they check on you more than you realize. Maybe through social media, maybe through mutual connections, maybe through old conversations they never deleted, maybe through memories they revisit when nobody else is around. But whatever the method is, the connection still feels active on their side, because every time they try to focus somewhere else, their attention somehow circles back. You know what's interesting? This doesn't feel obsessive. It feels curious. There's a difference. Obsession comes from control. Curiosity comes from emotional attachment. And what I'm picking up on is somebody who genuinely wants to know how you're doing. Are you happy? Are you moving on? Are you thinking about them too? Did they miss their chance? Those questions keep floating around this energy. I keep seeing moments where they randomly wonder what you're doing. Not because they're trying to interfere, because they still care. And caring has become much harder for them to deny lately. What's fascinating is that I don't feel like they're ready to reveal all of this. At least not yet. Because the Page of Swords feels cautious. Almost like someone standing at a distance watching the tide before deciding whether it's safe to step into the water. They're observing. They're gathering courage. They're trying to understand what they feel before they speak. And wow, that process feels much slower than they expected. Because part of them thought clarity would arrive all at once. But it hasn't. Instead, it seems to be arriving in pieces. One realization today, another realization next week, a memory that suddenly makes sense. An emotion they finally admit exists. A truth they can no longer avoid. And each piece is bringing them closer to something they've been resisting. I have to be honest, there are words this person wants to say. A lot of words. Some of them have probably been sitting inside this person for a very long time. Things they should have said months ago. Maybe even years ago for some of you. Things they replay in their head. Conversations they imagine. Explanations they wish they had given. Questions they wish they had asked. I keep hearing unfinished sentences. It's almost like this person starts talking in their mind and then stops halfway through. Because they're still trying to figure out how vulnerable they're willing to be. How honest they're willing to be. How much of themselves they're willing to reveal. And that's where things become complicated. Because the truth is sitting right there. But saying it out loud feels much bigger than thinking about it. Okay. The Ace of Pentacles keeps showing up around this energy. And honestly, I don't think this person is focused on repeating the past. That's what's standing out to me. The energy feels different. It feels less interested in revisiting old arguments and more interested in understanding whether something new is possible. Not new because the feelings are new. The feelings don't feel new at all. What's new is their perspective. What's new is their willingness to consider things they weren't ready to consider before. I keep getting the image of somebody slowly rebuilding confidence. Not confidence in the connection. Confidence in themselves. Because for a long time, they've doubted their own decisions. Doubted their own emotions. Doubted whether they could handle something this meaningful. And lately, that uncertainty seems to be shifting. Not disappearing completely, just becoming quieter. Because every lesson they've been learning is forcing them to grow in ways they didn't expect. And growth changes people. Sometimes slowly. Sometimes dramatically. Sometimes in ways nobody else notices until much later. There's something about the Three of Wands here that feels important. Because this person doesn't feel stuck anymore. They feel reflective. They feel observant. They feel like somebody looking toward a horizon they weren't able to see before. And honestly, that's a huge difference. Because when somebody is trapped in fear, all they can see are obstacles. When somebody begins healing, they start noticing possibilities. And that's exactly what keeps coming through. Possibility, potential. Curiosity about what happens if they stop running. Curiosity about what happens if they stop letting fear make every decision. Curiosity about what happens if they finally trust themselves enough to take a step forward. You know, there's a quiet hopefulness developing here. Not loud, not dramatic, very quiet, very private, almost like a small light turning on in a room that has been dark for a long time. I don't think they're talking about this with everyone around them. I actually think most people have no idea what's happening inside this person. Because on the surface, they may seem exactly the same. But internally, something is changing. The way they think is changing. The way they view the connection is changing. The way they view themselves is changing. And I keep picking up on this feeling that they want their next move to matter. They don't want to act impulsively. They don't want to repeat old mistakes. They don't want to approach this energy from the same mindset they had before, which is why they've been taking so much time. Not because they don't care, not because they've forgotten, but because somewhere deep inside, they're trying to become someone capable of handling what their heart has been asking for all along. Wow. The energy becomes surprisingly quiet here, not empty, not distant, just clear. Like somebody who's been walking through fog for a very long time and is finally beginning to recognize the landscape around them. I keep seeing the sun showing up, and honestly, every time it appears, I get this feeling that something inside this person is softening. Not because all of their fears have disappeared, not because every problem has been solved, but because they're starting to understand what actually brings meaning into their life. You know, there comes a point where distractions stop working, where temporary excitement stops feeling exciting, where all the noise that once seemed important starts fading into the background. And that's exactly what I keep picking up here. Things that used to hold their attention don't seem to have the same grip anymore. Things they once chased feel strangely empty. It's almost like they're waking up and realizing that happiness wasn't where they thought it was. And honestly, that realization feels emotional. Because when you spend enough time moving in the wrong direction, eventually you have to stop and ask yourself what you're actually searching for. I have to be honest. This person keeps returning to the same thought, the same feeling, the same connection. No matter how far they try to travel mentally, emotionally, or physically, something keeps leading them back here. And I don't think they're ignoring that anymore. There's a level of acceptance beginning to emerge. Not dramatic acceptance, not some huge declaration, more like a quiet acknowledgement, a truth that no longer needs to be argued with, a truth that no longer needs to be pushed away. Because what's interesting is that this connection doesn't seem to feel like pressure anymore. It feels like home, and wow, that's the phrase that keeps coming through. Home, not a place, not a building, a feeling. The kind of feeling that allows somebody to finally put down the weight they've been carrying. The kind of feeling that makes the world seem a little less complicated. I keep seeing the Four of Wands sitting here, and there's something about this energy that feels incredibly different from the way they used to approach relationships. Because before, I think they were focused on surviving, protecting, controlling outcomes, avoiding vulnerability, avoiding disappointment. But lately, their attention seems to be shifting toward stability, toward peace, toward building something that actually lasts. And that's a very different mindset. Because when somebody starts thinking about longevity, they stop making decisions based solely on fear. They start asking different questions. Not how do I avoid getting hurt, but what kind of life do I actually want? Not how do I stay safe, but what feels meaningful? And those questions are changing them. Okay, the Emperor keeps appearing around this person. And honestly, I don't feel stubbornness here the way I normally might. I feel responsibility. I feel somebody realizing they need to become the kind of person who can protect what they value instead of running from it. Because there is a difference, a huge difference. Running away is easy. Building something requires effort. Showing up requires effort. Being consistent requires effort. And I think they're beginning to understand that love isn't something you simply feel. It's something you choose, something you nurture, something you protect. What's fascinating is that this realization doesn't seem forced. It feels earned. Like every lesson they've been learning has slowly brought them to this place, a place where excuses no longer feel satisfying, a place where avoidance no longer feels productive, a place where honesty starts feeling necessary. I keep picking up on moments where they imagine different futures, different possibilities, different outcomes. And what's surprising is that the picture keeps becoming clearer. Not because they know exactly what will happen, because they know what matters. And honestly, knowing what matters changes everything. The King of Pentacles feels incredibly strong here. And when I sit with this energy, I don't see somebody looking for temporary emotions anymore. I see somebody craving stability, something real, something dependable, something that doesn't disappear the moment life becomes difficult, because they've experienced enough uncertainty to understand its cost. They've experienced enough confusion to appreciate clarity. They've experienced enough emotional distance to recognize genuine connection when they feel it. And I think that's part of what's happening here. They're beginning to value things differently, people differently, relationships differently, even themselves differently. You know, growth has a strange way of changing priorities. Things that once seemed urgent suddenly aren't. Things that once seemed impossible suddenly become worth trying for. And I think this person is standing somewhere in the middle of that transformation, not fully finished, still learning, still growing, but no longer moving in the same direction they were before. The Empress keeps showing up, and every time she appears, I get this overwhelming feeling of appreciation, almost like this person is finally seeing certain things they took for granted. Not just seeing them, understanding them. Understanding the value of patience, the value of kindness, the value of emotional safety, the value of being accepted for who they are. Because honestly, the more I sit with this energy, the more it feels like they're beginning to understand what made this connection different from everything else. Not louder, not more dramatic, just deeper, more meaningful, more difficult to replace. And that's not a realization they arrived at overnight. It's something they've had to grow into, something they've had to discover through experience. Something they've had to learn through absence. I keep hearing this person think, I don't want to keep running. Not because they're suddenly fearless, because they're tired. Tired of circles, tired of confusion, tired of pretending certain feelings don't exist. And for the first time in a long time, it feels like their heart and their mind are slowly beginning to move in the same direction. Okay, I'm going to leave the reading here. And honestly, I just want to say thank you for being here and sharing this moment with me. This energy feels less like an ending and more like someone slowly beginning to understand what truly matters to them. Whether that realization happens quickly or takes a little more time, that's a journey only they can walk for themselves. Your job isn't to carry their lessons. Your job is to keep showing up for your own life, your own healing, and your own happiness. Thank you for your beautiful energy, your support, and your presence here today. I appreciate every single one of you. Take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you again very soon in the next reading. Bye, everyone.